goodness. You just heard a pair of songs there that were, like I said before I played them, quite outside my comfort zone, and I have no problem admitting it, but they still bear listening to because good musicianship, they just crackle with energy. The first one was by Ginger, and the song was called Ape, A-P-E. They just released that as a single. I don't know if there's a full length to follow. And the song that just ended, okay, get this, the band's name is Bloodbath. It's kind of a death metal supergroup made of people from many different bands, including Michael Ackerfeld from Opeth. The song was called Blood Aside, and the CD is The Arrow of Satan is Drawn. So these are not happy people. That's getting to be borderline black metal, I think. In the next hour, we'll get back to my comfort zone with some power metal kinds of stuff. But between now and then, let's think about horror movies. And so in that sense, I guess Bloodbath singing Blood Aside off of a song about the Arrow of Satan is not a bad transition. It's time for Ken's Dark Corner. Trying a little bit of a different intro music for Ken's Dark Corner than I have been in the last few weeks, figuring if I'm posting these on YouTube, I should probably be using royalty-free music as my intro music so that the copyright people don't frown upon the things that I'm posting, even if it's just a little snippet. So it's Ken's Dark Corner. This is episode 8, and if you've listened in previous weeks, you know that I'm just going to give you what's supposed to be a brief discussion of some kind of horror movie theme, and it generally ends up lasting longer than I intended. But today I'm only talking about 4 movies, and so maybe I can improve on that. I have titled episode 8 in honor of Monty Python's Flying Circus being released on Netflix. I've titled it How to Recognize a Spoiled Film Series from Quite a Long Way Away. And the emphasis is on REC, because that's the film series that I'm talking about. All 4 of these are available for viewing on Amazon Prime. Oh, wait, check that. It's Hulu, because they have their Huluween selections available right now, and all 4 of these REC movies are available there. So if you have Hulu, you can watch for free or for no additional charge to what you're already paying for Hulu in the first place. REC is a series of 4 movies. The first one came out in 2007, and the first REC movie was absolutely spectacular. It's probably one of my favorite horror movies of all time. If I ever made a top 10 list, which I've never done, because I always forget details after time goes by, and I don't trust my own memory of how much I liked or disliked something. So making a top 10 list of all time for me is kind of futile. But if I were to make one, this would probably be in the top 10. It's a found footage movie that makes total sense in terms of why it's found footage. So REC, the first movie, by the way, spoilers, opens with a film crew, a young lady reporter and her cameraman. They are hooking up with a crew of firefighters in Spain. I'm guessing in Madrid. These are Spanish movies, subtitled. And they're going to ride around with the firefighters for 24 hours, hang out in the station, and just kind of see what a day in the life of the firefighter crew is. And after a little bit of getting to know you kinds of stuff with these characters, an alarm bell comes and they go off to a site. No expectations that things are going to be weird. Apparently somebody is having trouble. They're stuck in their apartment or something like this. And this fire crew and the reporter, they get to this apartment building in downtown Madrid. They go inside to see what's going on, and things get weird immediately. So it takes about 15 minutes until everything hits the fan, but once the first 10 or 15 minutes of this movie goes by, it does not let up for the rest of the hour and 20, hour and 30 minute running time. It is really intense. So the basic framework of this film is that this film crew and the firemen are in this apartment building, and strange things start to happen in terms of people that seem to be quite insane, doing weird things, including biting one of the firemen, and things get more and more intense from there. I won't describe too many things because you should watch it if you haven't already and experience the fun all by yourselves. But things start getting more and more intense, and it becomes clear that something very strange is going on. It's essentially a zombie movie, but it's not. These are not the undead coming back to life. There's a totally different reason for why this is happening. And like any sane group of people, these folks say enough is enough. We're going to try to get out of the building. And then they discover they cannot get out of the building because in the short time they've been inside the building, other authorities have come in and quarantined the building, basically by wrapping it in giant biohazard gear. The windows are covered with plastic. They can't get out the front doors. There's lights of all sorts outside. People on the outside with megaphones that you can't see telling them stay away from the windows, don't attempt to come outside, etc., etc. So it starts to get very claustrophobic. And then whatever is going on with these people starts spreading. More and more people come down with this thing that makes them go crazy and start attacking people and becoming very, very violent. The filmmaking is very, very suspenseful. It's very claustrophobic because of the layout of this apartment building. It's 3 or 4 floors high, and it's very skinny. So there's like a main staircase that goes up, and a lot of the movie is spent with people running up and down the staircase for various reasons and going into apartments and discovering strange things going on. But that's fine. Normally, I don't like fixed location movies where, oh no, these people are going to go in a house and now they're trapped in the house for the next hour and a half. Maybe they'll make a token effort to get out, but, breaking windows is hard, and so they're stuck in the house. That kind of thing I don't like. In this movie, the fact that it's fixed in a single location is a byproduct of the plot, and so it's not just a stylistic choice that was written into the movie, if that makes sense. And so I can deal with it a lot more. So there is an intense sense of dread and claustrophobia in this as more and more people are turning from regular happy humans into these vicious attack creatures that want to bite people's throats out. And as the movie goes on, you get closer and closer to finding out what's actually happening during this movie. And so if you do watch this movie, pay close attention to tiny details that characters mention that might seem irrelevant at the time, but later on turn out to be actually very pivotal. For example, you'll learn from one family that their dog is at the vet because it was sick. And you'll learn that the husband of a mom and daughter that are stuck in the building is outside the building because he went to get medicine for his daughter's tonsillitis. Okay? Seemingly trivial, but actually crucial to the way the plot turns out. And the end of the movie is great because the reporter and the cameraman finally make it upstairs to where basically the epicenter of all of this stuff happens to be. And the movie ends on a very, very frightening note. Okay, so I don't want to say much more, but The First Wreck is a spectacular movie. Anybody who's a fan of the horror genre should check it out. Wreck 2 came out in 2009. It was done in exactly the same style. It picks up about 15 minutes after the first movie lets off. So this is basically one story broken into 2 movies. There's another excuse for filming, and in this case, the soldier, I don't know if they're soldiers, police, whatever they are, they have helmet cams and body cams, and so you're watching a lot of the action through them. A couple of them actually have full-blown video cameras with them. You learn more about what's been going on, and in fact, they sort of over-explain things a few times, but that's okay. It's good to have resolution. So Wreck 2 starts up right away, following the coattails of Wreck 1 in exactly the same style. It's not as good, though, because the main characters in the first movie were pretty likable. In the second movie, you have 2 separate trains of main characters that you end up following through the movie. Not many of them are likable, and most of them are stupid. They do silly things. So that takes it down a notch. one of the pros to the movie is they try to explain some of the things that were happening in the first movie and also the second one. But one of the cons is they try to do some explaining of what's been going on in these movies, and over explanation isn't necessarily a good thing. One of the nice things that happens in this film series, though, altogether, is that there are small plot threads that carry through all four of the movies to link them into one kind of continuous whole, no matter what else is going on. So in the first movie, you had the mention again. I said spoilers, but these movies are almost 10 years old. So the first movie, there was a mention of a dog at the vet, and there was a mention of the dad outside because he was getting medication for his sick daughter. Well, in the second movie, there's a very, very brief, maybe 5 seconds during the opening action of the second movie where some man who's never identified is just kind of off in the side of the shot yelling to one of the firemen that he has to get back inside the building because he has his daughter's medication, so you know who that is. And other things that carry on through the third movie that I'll mention in a couple of minutes here. But first, it's 9 o'clock. You're listening to Ken the Metal Professor here. That's me. Hi. WVLP 103.1 FM in Valparaiso, Indiana. I guess overall you're listening to mostly metal, but at this moment you're listening to Ken's Dark Corner, and I'm talking about the Rec movies because they are all four available on Hulu. It's part of their Huluween selections. And so this is sort of a encouragement to go out and watch the first one, possibly the second one, and discouragement from that point on. So the second movie, I don't want to say too much about it, but the first one's very, very good. The second one is a dip in quality, but it's not a large enough dip that you shouldn't want to watch it. It's still pretty good. Okay, but then we get to movie number 3. And man. So first of all, the first two movies, Rec 1 and Rec 2, were directed by a pair of Spanish directors, Jaume Balaguero and Paco Plaza, and I'm probably mispronouncing those names horribly. And then they separated, and one of them each directed each of Rec 3 and Rec 4. So Rec 3, Genesis, released in 2012, was directed by Paco Plaza. Now, you would think with a name like Rec 3 Genesis, maybe this would go back to before the first movie and explain the origin or the genesis of everything that's going on, but no such luck. Rec 3 is sort of a parallel to Rec 2, so it's going on in the same time frame as the second movie. But it's done in a completely different style. So again, it picks up parallel to the second movie, and a couple of ways you know that are, for example, the opening segment of Rec 3 is filmed with handheld cameras. There is a wedding somewhere not in downtown Madrid, where everything else has been going on, and somebody is filming the events at the wedding on their handheld camera. So there you go. It makes perfect sense. And there's an old man at the wedding who's related somehow, I think, to the person holding the camera, and he has a bandage on his hand. And he happens to mention that he works at a veterinarian's place, and maybe he's actually the veterinarian. He was bitten by a dog that was in their care, right? And if you weren't paying attention to small details in the first movie, that's going to totally pass you by. But it shouldn't, because it's very important, because this guy is the one that sets everything off. So this movie is taking place in a time frame along with or just after Rec 2, but in a totally different location. However, this location is now tied to the events of the original location by this guy that worked at the vet who has been bitten by a dog at the clinic. In this movie, everything is handheld camera shot for the first 19 minutes. And then the title card finally comes on at minute 21. And because of events that are happening, we lose the handheld camera footage and switch over to standard Hollywood film style. And then once or twice through the movie, there's an excuse to go back to handheld camera. Like at one point, some people are crawling through ducts, heating ducts, and they're trying to see their way with night vision cameras. But then it would switch back out of that mode. And so that's a little disconcerting, because that's what made Rec 1 and Rec 2 so totally strong, was the way that they were shot. So this reverts to standard Hollywood film style. And the first two movies, even if the second one wasn't as good as the first one, the intent of the filmmakers was just to just to hammer you with this sense of claustrophobic dread of being trapped in this building with these monsters running around. There is no humor. Maybe, maybe once or twice there's a little snicker, right? This Rec 3, though, basically turns into, I wrote this down, National Lampoon's Zombie Die Hard. As, for example, one of the main characters discovers a suit of armor, like St. George and the Dragon armor, which he puts on to go out and try to find his bride, who's been lost in the mayhem, which has now started up. And there is some really good mayhem in this movie at the very beginning. Right at the end of the period where they're doing the handheld footage, there's tremendous mayhem during the reception when all heck breaks loose at the reception because of what's going on, and this virus or whatever it is starts getting passed around from to people. And when you get bit, you get infected. You know the drill. You've seen these kinds of movies before. But man, with the switch over to traditional Hollywood filmmaking or Spanish wood filmmaking and the introduction of this really oddball humor to the movie, it just tanks. I mean, there might be people that like this movie, but this is one of those movies that I had seen this before a long time ago, and I remember not liking it. But I'm going to watch it again because I'm going to talk about all 4 movies, and I want it to be fresh. And surely it can't be as bad as I remember. But even last week when I was watching this through for the second time, my jaw was just on the floor at some of the choices that were being made. So because of the setting and because of the goofy humor, there just is a total loss of all the claustrophobic dread that the first 2 movies had, which is a darn shame. So I cannot recommend Rec 3 Genesis. Rec 4 Apocalypse came out in 2014. Now, this was directed by the other of the 2 guys that directed the first 2 movies. Balaguero was his name. This movie ties more directly back into the first 2 because it opens with basically the destruction of the building from the first movies. The authorities have decided just to destroy the place. But the reporter that was in the first movie has now been rescued. And so she and some other folks have been hauled off to be held in isolation for studying because, of course, there's the evil bad guys who either they're trying to cure what's going on or they're trying to figure it out so they can start using it to their own nefarious ends. And they're taken to a ship so that they can be isolated out on the open seas. And so this is an example of, earlier on I said I'm not a fan of fixed location movies, but in the first one it's okay because the isolation of the location of the film is a byproduct of the plot and one of the reasons that it becomes so claustrophobic. This one is just a choice in the setting itself before the movie even got underway, right? Oh, we're just going to put them on a boat and have zombies on a boat, and wow, this is going to be intense. Well, it isn't. So Rec 4 is a little bit better than Rec 3, but not too much. Once they get on the boat, then people start turning into zombies. They're not really zombies, but I'm going to call them that anyway. And people are running around the boat trying to get away. The reporter lady wants to get off the boat. There's questions about who really is and isn't infected, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is all done in standard Hollywood filmmaking, by the way. There is really no significant use of handheld footage in this movie at all. So everything that made the first 2 special is totally thrown out the window in the 3rd movie and the 4th movie. The 4th movie ends with, maybe there's a chance that what's been on the boat when the boat finally gets destroyed, as you know it would, perhaps it's been released out into nature and will find its way back somewhere, but I don't think that they're going to make any more of these movies. So we don't have to worry about that. Now, I was talking before about having threads going through these movies, and during Rec 4, one of the characters that you find on the boat is an old woman who seems to be very confused about life in general. And she was apparently a guest at the wedding. I think she actually was the groom's grandmother. And so there is a link in this movie back to the 3rd one, which is also linked back to the 2nd one. So they actually do a nice job of linking the events in these movies together through relatively subtle means. But the overall stylistic choices of the 3rd one and 4th one just do not hold up against the first 2. So to close Ken's Dark Corner and close the door for good for this week, go watch Rec 1, absolutely positively. Probably watch Rec 2. I think you'll enjoy it. It's not as good as Rec 1, but, it's still a good time. Rec 3 and Rec 4, the only reason to watch those are that you can say that you did, right? So that you can tell your friends that you sat through those travesties that spoiled the whole series. And this is how to recognize spoiled film series from quite a long way away. Next week on Ken's Dark Corner, I'm not sure what's going to happen yet. I've still been trying to finish up watching Rob Zombie movies, and I need a couple of them to come back to Family Video here in town so I can watch them. I'll go back and check in a couple of days. I also thought about watching the Paranormal Activity movies, and I still plan to do that. But then I was reminded that there are 6 of them instead of 4, and that makes it a larger task, and I'm not sure I'll get through that by next weekend. We also have the debut of a series on Netflix called The Haunting of Hill House, which has been getting spectacular reviews, and so I'm going to try to watch that pretty soon. But I don't know if I'm going to get through all of them, all the episodes. I think there's 10, maybe 13, probably 10. Probably won't get through all of them before next weekend. So very likely next Sunday, episode 9 of Ken's Dark Corner, we'll be talking about the non-Halloween Rob Zombie movies. There are 4 of them. And now, thanks for listening to that diatribe. It's time to get back to some tunes. I'm Ken the Metal Professor. This is Mostly Metal now. Lance King is a vocalist that's been around in the power metal scene for a long time. He was in Balance of Power back in the day, and he's been a guest vocalist for many, 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 many projects. He has a solo CD from a few years ago called A Moment in Kairos, and he has just released it for free so that you can get a flavor of his old music and then hopefully go pledge his Kickstarter for a new album he's trying to put together. And so this song is off of A Moment in Kairos. It's called Awakening, and after that, you'll hear Days of Jupiter with their new song, The End Will Begin Again.